In this video, we're going to be discussing the essays for the course. Throughout the course, Brother Griffin has students pick between 4 options and submit 2 essays. Students are able to submit their papers sooner than they're due, but you should go on your general syllabus to find out the schedule for your papers when they are due. This video, while we go through the papers, is something that is a supplement to the other videos we've done. There's the general syllabus video, which should answer a lot of questions, but hopefully this video, which is more focused on papers, will answer more. You should also check out the other videos if you have more questions about other course material. The syllabus I'm using right now is for one of Brother Griffin's courses. This syllabus, I believe, is for a Book of Mormon course. No, this is for a New Testament course. And so if you're in a Book of Mormon course or a different class, you might find some of these options list different information. The information I'll be giving you will be different than what this is saying. I'll be speaking in a more general sense, and then you should check out your individual syllabus supplement for your course. But to talk about the papers a little bit, you are going to be submitting 2 separate papers. Each paper has to be one of the following options. You should not use the same option for both papers. It's not allowed. So one paper could be option 1 and the other paper could be option 3 or something of that sort. All the papers should be 3 to 4 pages long. That means 3 full pages or under 4 full pages. If you're 4.5 pages long, that's too long, or if you're only 2.5 pages, that's too short. We understand that sometimes students want to add more information because they have found so much information, but a good part of this course, or at least this project, this assignment, is to help you understand how to refine what you find. In addition to that, every paper starts with a cover sheet. This cover sheet is not part of your page count. So you should have a cover page and then 3 to 4 full pages of your paper. All papers need to be double spaced, 12 point Times New Roman font, and default 1-inch margins. You need to submit a Word document or a Pages document, not a PDF. If students submit a PDF, we're not able to check the margins, the sizing, the font, and it really prevents us from checking to see if students followed the rules. So if a student does submit a PDF, they're automatically going to lose some points. So make sure you're submitting a Word document or a Pages. All BYU students are able to download Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office for free while they're students here at BYU. If you don't know how to do that, I'd recommend just Googling it and checking it out, because it's great to have all of Microsoft Office on your personal computer, or if you're using a campus laptop or campus computer, all of those should have Microsoft Word or Pages. There's really no excuse for not being able to submit a Word document or a Pages document. As TAs, we're going to grade your work based on what each of these options says for your individual option. But understand, the options are meant to help you develop skills. They are meant to put you in positions to apply different things you might not normally do, and you shouldn't just spend your entire paper regurgitating information. A lot of these options, as we look through them, are going to talk about what you can do to best learn a new means of study, a new way of becoming more like Christ. You need to read and answer each one of the questions in your chosen option. If you just blatantly skip some questions in your options, you're going to lose some points. And every question should be treated with a fair amount of time. You shouldn't spend 2 pages answering one question for your option and then spend 1 paragraph answering 10 questions. That's not going to get you a lot of points. You're actually going to lose some points if you do that. We also take away points for sloppy, non-college level writing. That means you need to have a clear organization, a clear flow of thought, correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation. This is a college level paper. That means you shouldn't be using slang. You shouldn't be using inappropriate comments or things like that. Oftentimes, a lot of students ask us, should we use MLA or Chicago or Turabian? Use the format that's most comfortable for you. So whatever your major is, for instance, in my major, we use a lot of Turabian. That being said, you need to meet the basic 12-point Times New Roman font, default 1-inch margins, double spaced, and your paper should flow like a normal paper, not have a bunch of bullet points. That's not an appropriate way to write a paper. Every paper is worth 50 points. That means each paper is worth 5% of your final grade. Late papers lose 5 points a day per day they are late. That's per 24-hour period after the grace period ends on Monday at 11 p.m. So make sure you get it in within that 24-hour period. Every paper needs to have a cover page. Now, your cover page is going to be where you put your title and your student information, your name, the date, the class, as well as the information required for each individual option. No paper should have a title, your name, the date, the class, etc. after the title page. In other words, as soon as page 2 starts, the text of your paper should start. You don't need to include your name, date, information, and take up a good chunk of the first page of your paper. 1, that's poor college writing. 2, it is an easy way to lose points, so don't make that mistake. You don't need to repeat that information. There are cover page examples on Learning Suite, so be sure to check those out. Those should be helpful tools to help answer what questions you might come. As we go through this, we're going to go through these 4 options. Understand these options might be tweaked for your specific course. I'm going to try and speak in generalities. I'm not going to read them word for word. I'm just going to talk about the purpose behind each option and how to best achieve it. Whatever option you choose, you should include on your title page very clearly option 1 or option 2 and so forth. Don't make it difficult for us. You don't have to, but the dream is when your document that you submit is titled option 1 or option 2 or whatever, so we can just easily discern it, but you don't have to do that. Option 1 is an option about digging deeper into scholarly, peer-reviewed academic research. That means you should not be really reading scriptures, you shouldn't be reading general conference talks, you shouldn't be reading books written by prophets and apostles. While all of those things are amazing resources and you should use them in life, option 1 specifically is to help you dive into this scholarly academic realm of gospel topics and research. So first you want to select your gospel topic. That could be repentance, it could be faith, it could be church history or blacks in the priesthood. You really can pick a gospel topic you are interested in. And once you pick that, then you have to find an academic article or book that addresses that topic. There are thousands of them, and you can find links to them on Learning Suite, where we include a copy of a number of articles as well as links to go to BYU's academic research page. Every professor here at BYU for years has been writing hundreds of articles, and you'll be able to find just a vast resource here. You need to read at least 20 pages from those sources. And then in your paper, you're going to discuss about your topic and the process of seeking answers. I want to talk about how a lot of this paper is discussing, at least for option 1, what it means to learn through using academic research. So you write 3 to 4 pages describing your research experience. Not briefly, but you start off by talking about what you learned and why that's important, but then for the rest of the paper you talk about, do you agree with the author, his premise, method, his or her premise, methods, and conclusions? Why or why not you might agree with them? What factors are you going to use to determine if this is reliable and if this is a source you can trust when seeking answers? And that's where you can talk about maybe you want to turn to the scriptures or turn to something else. And then you should talk about why seeking at an academic level is different and how helpful it was. Notice how of the 4 or 5 questions it asks here, only one of them is talking about what you learned about the topic, and the rest of them are focused about how you learned. Students who write an option 1 paper and then spend 3 pages talking about what they learned about Jesus Christ's atonement, and then only 1 page about what it was like to study an academic level and why they agree or disagree with the way the author taught, aren't going to score as high as students who actually spend enough time really turning option 1 into what it is, a deep study of scholarly peer-reviewed research. Students often have questions about, well, how do I find the page number? Well, here, this tells you the page count, and then you can find out, understand, which of these were the actual text, which of these were footnotes or endnotes. Worst case, you can copy and paste the entire document you read into a Word document, convert that into 12-point Times New Roman font, like it should be. Don't make it 12 or 17 font, and then see how many pages it covers. You also don't need to finish an entire article. If you've read 22 pages and the article goes on for another 60 pages, you don't have to keep reading it. You also can use multiple articles. You can use 2 or 3 articles if you feel that you wanted to pick from different authors and compare them. Just make sure you're answering the questions in Part B of Option 1 for each of these authors' premise, methods, and conclusions. Understand, like, if you're only talking about one author, but you read only 5 pages from him and 15 from other authors, you're going to lose some points. Okay, Option 2. The purpose of Option 2 is to learn by doing. And that means you're going to pick a topic of the gospel, and then you're going to pick how to implement it into your life through actions. This option is a lot of fun, but it takes a lot of time. You need to spend almost a week and a half to effectively get full credit on this options. You're going to be picking something and think, well, what's going to make the biggest difference in my life? Prayer, service, forgiveness, something like that. And then you're going to study. You're going to study scriptures and general conference talks where they talk about what you should do to understand those principles. And then you spend 7 days of your life working on a plan that you establish to reach it. So on your cover page, you're going to talk about the 7 days you worked on your project. If you start this paper 3 days before it's due, you can't get the full points here. And you really don't want to do that. So if there's less than a week before the paper's due, and that's Saturday at 11 p.m., you shouldn't pick option 2. And you should plan on picking option 2 for the second paper, or plan ahead so you can accomplish this. It's a fantastic option. It just takes time to accomplish. And then notice in parts C and D for option 2, it's talking about things like, what are you trying to accomplish? What is the process you're going to do? How did you find these resources? Why did you decide to use them? And then the last question is, what did you learn? And then for part D, it's, well, what practice did you pick? What did you learn through the experience that you would not have learned from studying? What worked? What didn't work? Why do you think that is? Notice how all of these should not be simply, oh, look at all this stuff I learned about faith or prayer. A lot of it should be discussing why applying something into your life was different than simply studying it. Okay, option 3, I have a question. So this one is to help you find help you find and evaluate truth in a deeper level. You're here to pick a serious question or a difficult topic. That could be something you've struggled with your whole life, something you hear other people struggle with, or something you just want to know better. And your in-depth study should include scriptures, words of the living prophets, lds.org.topics, and other reliable resources. You have so many tools on lds.org. It'll give you Encyclopedia of Mormonism. You can go read books by prophets and apostles. You can meet with Professor Griffin or other religion professors and find books, Ensign articles, all this stuff that you want to use. You can even use things that have not been produced by the church as long as you discuss their reliability. You need to expand it beyond just 5 scriptures or 5 general conference talks. You want to integrate at least a mixture of 2 scriptures, 1 general conference talk, 1 book by Elder Holland, 1 chapter out of Encyclopedia of Mormonism, 1 Ensign article, something to really compare. Because when you look at the questions option 3 is asking, A lot of students make the mistake where they just spend an entire 3 to 4 pages answering. My question was why don't women have the priesthood? And then they spend 4 pages answering that question. Notice what it's asking. Well, what question did you research? What steps are you taking to find the most helpful researching? How much do you trust the resources? Why? Do you find consensus or differing ideas? Why do you think that is? Sometimes people say something simple like, well, my sources were the general authorities in the scriptures, and I trust them because they're inspired by God, and I found consensus because they don't ever agree, and that's how the Holy Ghost works. That's not what this is asking you. Brother Griffin is trying to show you that sometimes you're going to find scriptures that might disagree. Maybe you'll find something in the Doctrine and Covenants that contradicts something in the Old Testament. Well, how much do you trust it? How often have they been translated? Maybe you'll find something from President Kimball where he talks about Y being accomplished by Z, and then you'll find something by President Nelson where he talks about Y being accomplished by X. That's not consensus. That's differing ideas. They don't have to be arguing to have different ideas. An example I always use is President Monson may say service is visiting the sick in the hospitals, and President Nelson may say service is going to work in the bishop's storehouse. That's not consensus. It's a different idea. And why do you think that is? Well, maybe there's different ways to serve. And you should talk about that in your paper. Then in part C, for the first time in your paper, based on what you read and pondered, how do you answer your initial question? Okay? That should be a pretty simple answer. It shouldn't be a list of information. And then, how confident are you in that answer? What parts of it still are unclear? Why do you think there are various conclusions, and how plausible are they? What did you learn about seeking truth? Nowhere in this option should you spend 2 full or a large chunk of your paper just teaching us what you learn. That's not really what this option is asking you. It's asking you to take a good hard look at your process of coming to answers by using the church sources or other sources, but understanding why they may or may not be reliable. It's a great option. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, option 4. Now this one is different, but the same for every course. So this option is where you pick a section of the gospel in the scriptures to study it in depth. That means you're going to pick one chapter from the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, whatever course material you are studying. So if you're in a Book of Mormon class, you need to pick a Book of Mormon scripture or chapter. If you're in a New Testament class, you need to pick a New Testament chapter. Then you go through this process, and it takes time, so don't put this off. For option 3, it talks about going to Bible Hut and reading the KJV version. If this is a Book of Mormon class, it would have you read the 1830 edition. So understand there are slight differences in this option for different classes. But then notice what it's asking you. You're going to describe your process of studying and what you learned. So you make these assumptions before you study everything. Say you pick Jacob chapter 5, and you assume this is about the allegory of the olive tree. And I assume it's just going to talk about a gardener doing these things. And then you do the in-depth study and you realize, wait, I assumed this, but I actually meant this. Or I assumed this and this was correct. You need to describe the resources, the techniques you used to expand what you learned and how you learned. Which of the resources were helpful, least helpful? What are you going to use in the future and why? How you see the chapter differently. If you don't make assumptions, you're not going to be able to really write. And sometimes students say, well, I've never read this chapter. How can I make an assumption about a chapter I've never read? That's great, actually. You can make assumptions about things you haven't read because that's what an assumption is. An assumption is something you think it's going to talk about, but you don't actually know for sure. So if you've never read the chapter, you can absolutely make assumptions. And if you have read the chapter, you can make assumptions about what you remember. And you should talk about how using these tools in option 4 change the way you learned or what you learned in that chapter. Hopefully you've noticed a pattern for options 1 through 4. All of them are built around new tools. Whether that new tool may come from option 1, which is using academic scholarly research and articles. Option 2, which is applying something into your life and experimenting rather than just reading. Option 3, where you're comparing different prophets, apostles, scriptures, and resources and finding about how they disagree, and that's okay, why the Lord sometimes has inspiration come in different ways. Or option 4, when you read a chapter over and over and look at footnotes and definitions and different translations and what that means. All 4 of these options, if you let them, will be lifelong tools you should use for the rest of eternity to gain knowledge. You only have to do 2 of them in the course because there's only 2 papers, so you pick the 2 options you want to read the most or use the most. If you have any questions about your essay, feel comfortable coming and talking to your TA. A TA will not read a paper before it is submitted to see where you can improve. Rather, on BYU campus, there is the BYU Writing Center. All students are encouraged to go there and meet with a specialist to look over their paper. Those are the ones who are going to help you read this. The biggest way students lose points on their paper is they simply don't answer the questions. They get so excited about different things they've learned, and they forget what the purpose of the option is. And the purpose of the option is to grow and develop and gain new tools to become like Christ. I wish you the best in writing your papers, and I'm really excited to read them because I always learn so many great things. Okay, I hope you have a great day, and good luck.